With less than a week to go, we've all got a big decision to make about who leads the country for the next 5 years, who has power and influence in Westminster. During this campaign, we've spoken to all the main party leaders, including the Prime Minister and the Labour leader. Tonight, in our final interview before the election, it's the turn of the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey. Welcome, Sir Ed. My promise, as I've made the same promise to all the leaders who've sat in that chair, everything you say over the next half hour or so will be broadcast in full. I want to give you the chance to make your pitch to voters before election day. I hope you'll do your best to answer the questions, and just to stress to people watching, you've not been given any advance notice of those questions. Well, let's begin with you. Politics has been something of a roller coaster for you, hasn't it? You know, 1 minute you're in government, the next minute you're thrown out of your seat as a member of Parliament. Your party's almost wiped out. Now you're back on the up again.
On the roller coaster.
Yeah. Looking like you might have real power. And I think what people want to know as they watch this interview is, if you do get some power in the next House of Commons, what will you do with it?
Well, we're setting out in our manifesto a fair deal, and that at the heart of it has the health service and care. And the reason the party has chosen to put health and care right at the centre is because the voters are saying that's one of their biggest concerns, if not the biggest. They're worried about the health service, getting a GP, finding an NHS dentist. They're worried also about care for their loved ones. And we've been talking about social care, but we've also been talking about family care. Because that's really important. There are millions of people looking after loved ones who don't get the support they deserve.
And you've talked movingly about your
my own personal experience. You know, my dad died when I was 4, and then my mum became terminally ill when I was 12, and I nursed her with my brother until she died when I was 15. Then my brothers and my nana and granda looked after me, and then I looked after my nana when she became frail and elderly, and now I look after my son John, who's got an undiagnosed brain condition, and it means he can't really walk by himself or talk. So I've been a carer much of my life, and that's informed me. And because I know there are millions of people who have stories, caring stories like mine, I think it's been really important to talk about that too.
Yeah, you've talked, you've made people laugh as you've done those stunts, you've made many people cry as they watched your broadcast about caring for your son. You're not going to be Prime Minister, you've been clear about that. But you are making a big promise that you could save the NHS. Well, how, if you haven't got that sort of power?
By winning the argument, and by making sure we have lots of Liberal Democrat MPs. I think if people vote for their local Liberal Democrat candidate, they know they're going to get a local champion who's going to champion their local NHS, their local care. But they'll know that, I think in this election, there'll be a lot of Liberal Democrats in the next Parliament who are going to make this our number one priority.
Well, we're going to talk about policy. We're going to talk about whether the numbers add up. But first of all, let's talk about your record, because you do have a record. You were, of course, in that coalition government. There you are, sitting at the cabinet table.
Bit younger.
Alongside Jeremy Hunt. Now the Chancellor was the Health Secretary, David Cameron was the Prime Minister. And that government of Liberal Democrats and Conservatives delivered huge cuts in spending on our public services. Now, you've never criticised austerity. Why not?
Well, there were tough decisions we made. And, you know, I had a choice, as did every Liberal Democrat minister. Did I stay there or did I go? I think it could have been quite easy to go and criticise the government from the media studios and then potentially get re-elected rather than losing my seat in 2015. I, as many other colleagues did, we rolled up our sleeves and tried to fight for the things we fought for. And we stopped the Conservatives doing some things. The clearest example is on welfare. The budget after we left office and the Conservatives were running by themselves, George Osborne cut the welfare bill by £12 billion.
When you were in that cabinet room, the welfare budget was cut by 27 billion, a lot more than that, 12 billion. When you were in the cabinet room, was the bedroom tax discussed? Because the bedroom tax was implemented when you were at the cabinet table.
Really happy to answer those. I mean, there was one, I think it was the second budget, the Conservatives wanted to freeze benefits and freeze pensions when inflation was at 5.2%. And we said, absolutely not. And we won. And there are other things that we did which helped people who were from poorer backgrounds. I'll give you one example. And the Conservatives didn't want to do that, and we forced it. So free school meals for infants. George Osborne didn't want to do that, but we forced it. So
You see,
it was
you
a
did
tough
do the
time.
bedroom tax as Liberal Democrats. You did do the benefit cap as Liberal Democrats. You did cut welfare by £27 billion. Isn't the truth that you might always blame the Tories? You often say, I fought them every single day.
And I did.
You spent the whole time in government working with the Tories to deliver austerity. It was a joint enterprise, the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, because at the time you argued it was right for the economy.
Well, I am not proud of every decision I had to take, but my point is, if you wanted to change things, you had to roll up your sleeves and not quit. And we stood there and we sat there and we argued our case. And I'm really proud of things we achieved. We wouldn't have quadrupled renewable power if the Liberal Democrats hadn't been there. We wouldn't have made Britain the world leader in offshore wind. We wouldn't have legislated on mental health. We wouldn't have legislated on same-sex marriage.
So the things you
so
achieved,
many things that we achieved.
the one you're very familiar with, you're reminded of all the time, is the fact that Liberal Democrats promised to curb student fees. And in fact, you ripped up that promise and they were tripled. If there's somebody watching now who's angry about austerity and angry about the level of student fees, why should they trust Ed Davey?
Well, there were very difficult decisions. That's true. And that was probably the most difficult one. And Liberal Democrats got punished. I lost my seat along with many, many colleagues, and we've had 3 tough elections. And I've had time to really reflect on that. And there are 2 big lessons I've learned from that experience more broadly. The first is, don't promise something you can't deliver. And as leader, with the manifesto for a fair deal you've got on the table there, I've made it clear that everything in there can be delivered, practical, costed and so on. So that was the first lesson.
We will come to that.
Yeah. The second lesson was we needed to rebuild trust. Because you say, people might say, well, why can we trust him? We needed to really work on that. When I became leader, in my acceptance speech, I said we needed to wake up and smell the coffee, and we needed to talk to people in their communities to find out what their problems were and make sure we had answers for them.
Yep.
And that's what we've done. And I think through this parliament, whether it's the parliamentary by-elections we've won in Conservative heartlands, whether it's the local elections we've won, where we performed extremely well, pushed the Conservatives into third place this May. I think we are.
Well, and we're going to come to the detail of what is in here in just a second. But let me raise another question you're often asked, but it's important because it goes to the heart of trust. Again, one of your jobs in government with the Conservatives was to be Minister for the Post Office. There you are at a conference talking about the Post Office in government on your side, it says critically. Now, we haven't the time now to go into the detail of this. You'll do it at the Post Office inquiry. But you met Alan Bates. He was the leader of the campaign for justice for the sub-postmasters. He alerted you to what turns out to have been a huge miscarriage of justice. The simple question is, why weren't you on his side? Why were you on the side of the establishment of the Post Office?
Well, when I met Alan Bates, I took his issues very, very seriously. He had a whole set of questions about the Horizon computer system. Probably the most infamous is the fact that he believed that the Post Office had remote access, so could get into the Horizon system or in the sub-post office of a sub-postmaster. And so I took his concerns and problems really seriously, and I put them to my officials and to the Post Office. And this, I think, will come out in the inquiry. And I was given categorical assurances, Nick, categorical assurances that, first of all, independent IT specialists had checked the system and assured it, that it was working incredibly well in other areas, that the trade union, the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, said it was okay, that the courts had examined it.
So you're saying you were lied to?
Yeah, and
I think what people might wonder is you must have known somebody was lying. Either Alan Bates wasn't telling the truth, or the Post Office wasn't telling the truth. And even though you said you were in government on your side, you believed the people with power. You didn't believe the little guy.
Well, to be fair,
that was a mistake, wasn't it?
Well, to be fair, I went to the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, who were democratically elected by sub-postmasters. and I put this issue to them. And in other meetings, they really didn't like the Post Office. They were criticising them. So I thought that they would criticise the Post Office for Horizon if there was a problem. But they said, no, there wasn't a problem. And
You've talked about learning just a second ago, what you learned. Are you saying to people watching now, if I were in power, I would behave differently? Or are you saying, I did everything I could have done?
Well, I've certainly reflected on it. And I think there's two things we need to learn. Because when you're in government, you're doing many, many things, you assume that people are telling you the truth when you ask them questions. And if people
that
don't...
was a mistake, wasn't it?
Well, the courts were lied to. Many judges were lied to, many lawyers, other ministers, the media, the sub-postmasters were lied to. It was a conspiracy of lies that only was found out 7 years after I left office in the 2019 High Court case. Yeah. And so what I take from this is a really important point. The scandal of Horizon, but the scandal of contaminated blood, the scandal of Hillsborough and other scandals have seen this conspiracy of lies. So
maybe you shouldn't believe what you're told by powerful people, and you should believe what you're told by people who are the little guy.
Well, listen, the little guy needs more protection. That is right. So how do we do that? I think there are two ways. First, we pass a new law for a duty of candour. So every public official, be they a police officer, be they in the NHS, be they in the post office or wherever, if they don't tell the truth and it's found out, they'll go to prison. Secondly, the reason why we actually unpicked, and the lies were unpicked at the post office 7 years after I left office, was by a whistleblower. And so we've said in that manifesto, we want to strengthen the protections for whistleblower, have an office of the whistleblower, so the little guy gets that support.
Okay, let's turn to the future. Let's turn to what's in your party manifesto. Some of the big issues, now the biggest perhaps for any party aspiring to influence government or to be in it one day, is tax and spend, isn't it?
Definitely.
And you will have heard the experts say there's a conspiracy of silence about the tough choices ahead. Now, you've been honest, you want to put tax up. You've said you want to put taxes up on the banks and the energy companies, the water companies, the tobacco companies, the tech giants. I put it to you that it is simply not credible to say to people, you can have everything you want, all the promises in here, and all we'll do is tax the bad guys, the people you don't like. Nobody's going to believe that.
Well, I think what we've set out is absolutely believable and credible. And I do think the banks are making huge profits, record profits, and they can afford to pay a bit more. We're only saying take the tax burden on banks back to what it was in 2016. I do think that the oil and gas companies at least, have made huge profits because Putin illegally invaded Ukraine, pushing up the price of oil and gas. I think they can afford to pay a bit more. I do think
taxes on businesses are never victimless, are they? The Institute of Fiscal Studies told us all taxes on business are ultimately felt by real people. Either these businesses are going to put the bills up, so we'll pay it as consumers, or they'll cut dividends to shareholders. Sounds remote, but it'll affect all our pensions, or they'll squeeze the pay of their workers. I'll put it to you again, it isn't credible to say, I can turn everything around, I can save the NHS, but none of you will pay a penny.
Well, I still dispute that, I'm afraid. The oil and gas companies, for example, they are making windfall profits that neither they, their executives, their shareholders expected to make because of an illegal war where Putin is killing innocent Ukrainians. I think there is a moral obligation to have that windfall tax.
Well, there is a windfall tax, isn't there? You see, I was looking through this list of bogeymen that you say you'll tax. Popular taxes, because nobody likes banks or energy companies in the main. And the only bad guy you're not promising to tax, so far as I can tell, is Darth Vader, Voldemort and Dr. Evil. It's just a list of people you know the public don't like. They'll pay the price, you don't have to.
Well, let me give you a reason why we're not going to ask people to pay higher taxes. It's because Conservatives have shoved up taxes to record levels. And people are really feeling the pinch, Nick. Higher energy bills, higher food bills, higher mortgages,
the question
higher
here
rents.
is whether it pays the bills as you set out in here.
Well,
let's take health that you talked about.
I'm very happy to talk about that, but let's be clear why we're not raising taxes on ordinary people, because they're at record levels at a time when people are feeling the pinch. So I think it's absolutely incumbent on any party to say, look, we do need to sort out the NHS, we do need to sort out the schools and so on, but we can't ask ordinary people to pay because they're already paying too much.
They may well pay because, as the IFS have said, they may pay because the interest rate they get on their savings is less if you tax the banks, and the bills will go up if you tax the energy companies. Now, the key to this is whether the sums all add up. And as I say, you've had some credit for saying we'll spend more on the NHS than other parties, the big parties at least have said. But you've also said you'll give us a lot more. We'll get free personal care, it'll be easier to see the GP and so on. What I simply want to ask you is, where is the money for the problems that are already there? The juniors doctors are on strike now. Your extra money doesn't pay for a pay rise for them, does it? It doesn't pay for a pay rise for nurses. It doesn't pay for the long-term NHS workforce plan, which you're committed to.
Really happy to take that on. First of all, I think doctors and people working across the NHS would realise that if the Liberal Democrat ideas got in, that they had politicians who are really taking the problems in the NHS seriously. And I think they would really, really welcome that. 8,000 new GPs in the next Parliament, everyone would see the benefit of that across the NHS.
Well, if you got them, the money might all go on repairing the buildings, paying the nurses, paying the doctors and the workforce plan.
I'm happy to come to that. On our costings, which you're referring to, we've been super, super cautious in two ways. First of all, on the taxes we've increased, we've taken account of what's called behavioural change. If companies or individuals say, right, I'm going to act a bit differently. And so we've got very low estimates for the tax revenue we raise, and I think we're being ultra cautious. Secondly, some of the spending we're doing will produce savings in the future, and we've not included those in our costing. Let me give you the big one.
It's the spending is the issue, not the taxing and the savings.
Well, this is really important, actually. Free personal care, which is expensive, and we've shown how we get the money for. The Institute of Public Policy Research says by 2031, that will give the NHS £3.1 billion of savings every year. We haven't included that in our costing, so we've been very, very cautious, Nick.
50 billion is the cost of the workforce plan. Ultimately, you're promising to spend a fraction. Let's move on if we could, though, because one way
I've got a few other answers I'd love to give to you, though.
Forgive me, it's only because I know you'll want to talk about the economy, because, of course, one way that people can pay for their promises is not just tax or borrowing, but making the economy perform better. And everybody who sat in that chair has wanted to say that that's what they want to do. Now, when Keir Starmer was in that chair, the Labour leader, he said, look, I'm going to have to make enemies, his phrase. I'll have to make enemies in order to get the economy moving again, to reform the planning system, to get people building. Do you agree that you need to make enemies, to build houses, to have development, to get the economy moving?
Well, I certainly think you need to reform the planning system. The current planning system isn't building the homes we need, and it's not doing it at pace, and it's frankly doing it to the developer's tune. I've called it a developer-led planning system. And there's a different approach, and it has been tried elsewhere, and I can show you that it's worked elsewhere. It's a community-led approach. And what does that mean? It means you build houses that the community needs, more affordable ones, in the right places. And crucially, you have the infrastructure, both the social infrastructure, the GPs, the schools, and the physical infrastructure, be that the transport or the water infrastructure, for example. And so our approach is a very different one. I'm really proud of it.
Community-led is an interesting phrase, because where Liberal Democrats lead their communities, where they've got councils, where they've got members of parliament, again and again they oppose development. The Lib Dems are blocking plans for a new town at an airfield near Henley with 3,000 homes, when there were proposals to build thousands of homes near your constituency in Surrey. You said the numbers were eye-watering. When your deputy, Daisy Cooper, was told there'd be thousands of new homes built in her St Albans constituency, she opposed those plans. So you talk about community-led, but when the Lib Dems lead communities, they lead them to block development, don't they? Not to allow
Nick,
it.
for every example you've got there, I've got an example which proves the case that I'm making and against yours. Let me give you some examples of them, mate. First of all, my wife, in my own area. She's a housing portfolio holder on Kingston Council. We have the largest council house building programme in 40 years, a community-led approach.
What about the examples I gave you?
Well,
They're not wrong, are they?
Well,
Each of those is true.
Nick, I don't know about the individual ones, but
Well, you know about yours, and you know about Daisy Cooper's, and surely you know about 3,000 new homes near Henley.
Well, if I may, you give me some examples, I'm giving you counter-examples. That is how this debate goes on. And I'll give you another counter-example. If you look at Liberal Democrat-run South Cambs District Council in Cambridgeshire, they're being criticised by local Conservatives for building too many houses.
No one's saying you never build houses. I'm saying you generally lead the opposition.
No, but Nick, I
let's
think
return to your
but Nick, hold on, sorry. I think that's wrong. I just think what you've said is wrong, and I can give you counter-examples. Okay. And our approach of community...
No time to give them a lot now, but finish your thoughts.
Our community-led approach, one of the reasons I like it, is it actually says to people who are already living there, you don't worry, there'll be more GPs. So the GP that can't give an appointment now won't have another 1,000 patients. That's why community-led approach will see more houses built.
Sorry to rush you, but I want to come to something else that you know is important. Although I wonder whether you're prepared to make enemies in order to deliver it. You're passionate in your view that Brexit was wrong. Your predecessor used to say bollocks to Brexit, whereas we search through this manifesto, you have to get to page 112.
I'm glad you've read it all.
Brexit is mentioned in there. Now, you just say, we're not going back in, but we do want better trading. Are you prepared to make enemies and pay the price for that? Because the EU's chief negotiator until recently, Michel Barnier, is clear. There's a price if you want access to our market, and the price is free movement. You have to allow immigration all the way around the EU. Would you pay that price?
Well, I don't think the single market with free movement of labour is going to happen in the next Parliament. What I do think is going to happen is a good trade deal, certainly if Liberal Democrats had our way. And while I respect Michel Barnier, I've spoken to other European politicians. For example, my oppo in the German Liberal Party, who's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, or the equivalent of the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Germany. So a rather important German politician.
But you can get, you say, better trading without more migration.
Yeah, let me take you through this, because it's what he's told me. He said there is a trade deal to be had which was short of the single market, which will tear up some of the red tape the Conservatives have covered our businesses in, will get rid of some of the delays and some of the costs, help our farmers, because it's mutually beneficial. It will fall short of the single market.
Yeah, but in here it says you want a form of free movement and you want it now. Now it's got a different name. You call it the Youth Mobility Scheme.
Very happy to talk about that.
And it means that anyone under 35 can come from any country in the EU and they can come and work here and they can do it for up to 3 years. So is your message, at a time when migration is at a record high, is your message to the electorate, young Polish plumbers can come, young Romanian builders, young Lithuanian lorry drivers, they can come here, they can work for 3 years, because we think that is the price we're willing to pay to get better relations with the EU?
No, that's not my message. I think immigration needs to come down. But let me take you through the youth mobility scheme you've rightly referred to. We currently have a youth mobility scheme in operation with Korea, with Japan, with Australia, and a number of other countries.
Not with Europe.
But not with Europe. So a young person can apply from Korea to come to the UK, from Japan, from Australia, and have this 2-year visa.
Forgive me, Sir Ed, plumbers don't come from Japan to get jobs, do they? Builders don't come from Korea to get jobs. This change, yes, would mean easier travel for young British people, and they'd be very pleased about that, no doubt. But it would also mean people would come from Eastern Europe to Britain at a time of high migration to do jobs. Well, is that something you're happy to defend?
Let me defend and explain what the system is, because it's a capped system. It's not free movement of labour. The way the youth mobility scheme works at the moment for Japan or Australia or wherever is that a certain number of visas can be given to young people. And that's what we envisage with the European dimension. We'd obviously have to negotiate it, but that's what we mean by that. And I think that's really, really sensible. It means that you can control things, but it also means our people, our young people, have that wonderful freedom, and it means that when there are specialist people, they can come.
Yeah, you're not, I think, contradicting my summary of it. You're just saying there's a bit of a gap.
The scheme is very different from the one you described, to be fair.
Let's turn to something that throughout your life in politics, for you, for Liberal Democrats, is something you've wanted, which is voting change, voting reform. Would it be fairer if Nigel Farage and Nigel Farage's party got many more seats, given that in the past he's had millions of votes, this election he's likely to get millions of votes? Is that the change you are prepared to see?
Well, the Liberal Party and the Liberal Democrats for over 100 years have supported fair votes. And the reason we do is because millions of people vote. They're going to vote on July the 4th. And because their vote only counts in their constituency, it's not going to impact the future government, the future parliament. And we think that is wrong. So, I'm coming to your question, we believe in fair votes, and therefore you take the democratic response. And if that means parties who I don't agree with or don't share anything in common get more MPs, so be it. That is democracy.
So Nigel Farage should, under your voting change, or people like him, should get more representation in the House of Commons. There might be people who look around at the politics of Europe, who look around at the divisions in Europe and the extremism in Europe, who don't find the idea of changing to a different sort of voting scheme very attractive.
Well, the polls suggest that more people are finding it attractive, actually, despite what you say, Nick. And moreover, here's the point. As a Democrat, I want to debate with people who I disagree with. I've done that all my life. And you only win the debate, and I believe in this election we're winning the debate on things like health and care and sewage and the cost of living. You only win the debate if people who don't share your views are there to debate with you. I'm happy. It doesn't matter where they're from. It could be from any party. To be frank with you, I'm happy to debate them.
You are happy to debate with the likes of Nigel Farage. You no doubt have seen the controversy there is now. Do you regard him, do you regard his supporters as racists?
Listen, I don't share any values. The Liberal Democrats don't share any values with his party and him. I'm, in this election, though, want to make sure people understand what our values are. Because I think when they do, when they listen to us and hear us and get the chance, I think it will be winning a lot more votes. One of the problems in modern politics, actually, is if you say something outrageous, you get covered. When you say something that's sensible and reasonable and actually has a solution for people's problems, you don't get covered. There's a problem, I would suggest, with how the media covers politics in some ways.
Oh, you want to stay silent about Nigel Farage because you think that's what he wants, condemnation from people like you.
I want to talk about Liberal Democrats in an election because I don't get enough time to talk about it.
Well, you've got about a minute left and you've had almost half an hour to talk about it. Like all the leaders, including Mr. Farage, of course, you'll be well aware, and it's depressing for all of us who believe in politics, that there's been a collapse in trust in politics and politicians. It's a tough question, but it's one I think you've reflected on, that given your role that we've discussed in austerity, the broken promise on tuition fees, the failure to stop the post office scandal when some people think you had the chance to do so, are you the man who can help restore trust in politics?
Well, that will be the voters' decision. And what I say to the voters is, look how we've developed the party. The fact that we're talking about the NHS and care, your issues, the fact we're talking about the cost of living crisis you've suffered, the fact we're talking about the environment and things like sewage. Listen to us and come and vote for us, please.
Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me. That's the last of my leaders' interviews. You can catch any of them again on iPlayer. Just search for Election 2024. It's a big decision we've all got. The choice is yours. Good night, and thank you for watching.